Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Alexander, what's our first question today?
First one's coming from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida, USA. What are the advantages and disadvantages of simulive streaming?
Alex?
The main advantage is that you have everybody looking at something at the same time. So if you look at like an Apple event where they put it out, where it's and there's a premiere function inside of YouTube that people use, that it syncs up all the chats. It syncs up the news. It means that everybody gets to know everything at the same time. There's a bunch of syncing behaviors that it creates. That creates the idea is that it creates a certain amount of energy when you're able to actually get that to work. You have to be big enough to make it worth it. So the thing is that an Apple can do something that we may not succeed at. A very large YouTube channel might be able to get some value out of it, but I would say that the value is pretty low in most cases, and part of that is because there's no interactivity. So you can have interactivity in the chat. Some people do a simulcast where they play the video and they have the experts that were actually in the video answering questions in text, in the thing. So they're kind of able to touch on that. Or you do a simulcast and then right after it, you're going to do a session. We did a bunch of these for a client. And basically what we did is we played for each session, instead of having them present all of that, we built a great video that was 30 minutes long or 40 minutes long. It had interviews and all the edits and all the other things that we wanted. When we came out of that, we switched. So that was the simulcast or the simulive. And then when we came out of it, they were there in Zoom, ready to answer questions from the audience who had just watched the video. And so it was a nice way to deliver that video in a clean, very tight way, but then still add the interactivity to the end. But the key is that everyone had to watch the first one live together so that they could they could answer questions. Now you could. I think it's actually advantageous to have people watch it before that interactivity. So long before the interactivity, I think that, releasing stuff a week before and then your live events are really just the Q&A and discussion about it, I think is actually a better solution. But again, for companies that are really large that can generate a lot of interest, when Apple does it, there's many millions of people watching that live, including us. But when other people do it, you may end up with not that many people, and it was still not really worth it.
Courtney?
Yeah, one big advantage is it eliminates the possibility of demo fail, which in a live presentation is always a danger. And also, you can fit into time constraints a lot easier. I was watching this live broadcast from the ASC for the last 2 days, which was very interesting on AI. We had a lot of famous cinematographers, and they were live streaming from the clubhouse. And they had questions coming from the audience, and it was a live presentation, but they're trying to do live interactive AI interaction on the stage in a live broadcast, and they had a strict schedule. And every one of them would run up against the clock. Oh, well, we don't have enough time to show you this because the next presentation's coming in. And so you just run out of, the utility of it becomes more limited by time constraints. If it's a live demonstration and things don't go correctly, and especially when doing generative AI and you're having to wait for the generative AI to iterate each time, and they're trying to answer questions in between, but it ends up stretching out each segment to the point that you don't get as good a demonstration if they had prepared a demonstration and pulled out the waiting for the generative AI to generate in between and given you a live simulive streaming event where they still had time for people to had the experts there to answer the questions, but the demonstrations would be canned,
Alex?
Yeah, and again, if they had, I think I will still argue in that's a great example of there's this old-fashioned idea that we have to have an event and we have to have people all come together. If they had released those videos and said, hey, here are all the videos that we're going to talk about next week, and you can watch them all in their entirety, and they're recorded nicely and edited nicely, and they, you release them on a Monday, we're going to do the event next Monday or next Tuesday, the conversation would be much more powerful then than it would be, the idea would be, it'd be much better with that video, pre-cooked than what you're going to see because right when you see it, you're also thinking about it. And if they open it up chat and they had other things, the event could last a week online and then culminate in a live stream. And that's where we've seen some of the best results.
And with what we saw Apple doing earlier this week with WWDC, they definitely have a much more, protein-packed, dense stream of information. There's no way that they could have done that stage show live and delivered the volume of information that they delivered as clearly and concisely as they did. They were on for 90 minutes. But they're almost getting to the point where it's a little too tight. Like, I want there to be a little bit of authenticity and realness to it. Like, it's getting to the point where just back off a little bit so you don't seem plastic. But it is fun.
I would go the other direction and just say, just make it a show. Just make it a show about, like, just create a TV show that's 90 minutes long about your products and call it a day. Like, I think that they're in this, I think Apple, to your point, is in this uncanny valley between a stage event and a TV show. And I just don't think, I think that they either have to go back, to your point, I think they have to go back to the stage and go, we're going to slow it down and go back to stage, which I don't think is tenable at this point. I think we're so used to the density. I can't watch anybody else's keynotes now because I'm so used to it moving faster. Or just make it a show. Like, just make it a great show and get close-ups. And there's no reason to stand you could build so many great shots standing, like in the research room and someone looking up from with a soldering iron, looking up and going, this is what we're doing with the chip. Like you could create so much more fun if they stop trying to make it look like a keynote. I think that they're afraid to do that because when something's really working, you're always afraid to change anything. And I think that they've slowly changed to this point. I thought that this one was probably the least compelling one, not just because of the content. I feel like the production was the least compelling in maybe 3 or 4 years. So I think that they do have to kind of figure out what they're doing there. And I think the iPhone production, iPhones are cool, but I think it's actually holding them back from the quality overall of the show.
Yeah. Ryan Thompson in the chat chimes in. He says, let's call it a key-mercial. I like it.
A key-mercial. Yeah. I like that.
But yeah, I think what you described is, I think, putting a really nice point on it. The weirdness that I'm perceiving is really the fact that we have all of the tools of the medium that we're not using because we're trying to make it feel like it's a keynote, even though it's recorded. And that's where we got that disconnect.
Yeah.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. My vMix output is not sending over NDI Bridge, but it does send signal over the local network in the house of worship. I have all the other NDI sources over Bridge. Is a vMix or firewall setting, or is there a vMix or firewall setting I'm missing?
Alex?
Now, Zach, this is the place where I don't use NDI Bridge or vMix, and so what I do is I jump on this and I raise my hand so that CJ doesn't have to do what I'm doing right now, which is that I'm attempting to talk long enough for someone in the forum to answer the question because I don't know what the answer is. So it does sound like a perplexing problem if NDI sources are not showing up in Bridge at all. So anyway, so this is we'll try to find someone to jump on that question in the future. But I think that the fact that people aren't responding inside of our chat as well, it's probably it sounds like a pretty particular problem. So it would be. Anyway, so hopefully we'll bring that back to another Friday. Hopefully we'll have more of the infrastructure folks on another Friday and we can see what we can do.
Next question.
This one is a QR code question from Johnny Hogan in Sydney, Australia. I'm looking at purchasing a Behringer Feedback Pro to automate the control of feedback for events, especially reflective spaces with many open mics. What are the panel's thoughts on the device?
Alexander?
Well, these devices definitely do help and they do work. But my question to you is if you're doing events, I'm assuming that you're not the only person doing it. You really should have an audio engineer there that's experienced that can ring out the room properly. A good audio engineer is you're never going to have feedback problems at a live event with a well-tuned PA and proper gain staging. So if you don't have an experienced audio engineer, yes, you can do that. The other option too is you didn't mention how many open mics you're dealing with. check the digital console that you have and see if it supports auto mix. A lot of entry-level mixers will only support 8 channels of Dugan. So if you're in the situation where you are needing more than 8 channels of Dugan, you're probably going to have to get a different console, maybe even rent one that can actually support, 32 channels of Dugan or however many channels that you need. That will really help balance and automatically balance open mics and push those down when they're not actually speaking. There are also other things you can do with processing too, if you know how to set up downward expanders properly too. That can also help. So again, there's really no good replacement for a experienced engineer.
Alex?
Yeah, and Mickey says that it's an easy way to make your mixes look instantly sound like poo. I think that's a technical term. It's really on the edge of what we can and can't say on the show, but we'll give poo a pass. Just to pick appropriate loudspeaker system and placement, ring out the room, gain stage properly, ride the favors, and an auto mix engine will help a little bit. So all the stuff many of the stuff that Alex said there. And if you're it's good to get a professional, and the only way to learn how to do this is to do it. So what I would recommend is that if you are, I would try to bring in a professional. If it's not something you can do all the time, spend some time figuring it out, and knowing that there's going to be some issues. Ringing out the room is the thing that I would perfect, rather than a feedback. It's really about building notches there and hearing it. The room has its own frequency, and with the people in it, it'll have a different it might have a different frequency, but you need to kind of learn how to do that. If you're trying to do this, having some little box or crutch. And I say this as someone who used to have a Behringer Feedback Pro and learned, or maybe a bunch of them, learned that it was many years ago, probably 20 years ago or something like that. We had some of these feedback killers and crunchers and all these other things. Mostly because we were sending out people that just didn't know enough about it. And we just said, just plug this in and it'll go away. But very quickly we learned that it wasn't much harder just to do it right. So getting gain staging correctly, and gain staging is a big piece of this as well, because you don't have any control. We were doing an event at the Win, and they have a very specific, when one person at the Win speaks, they have his audio team come in and do it. And it was all over the place. And I had a really good audio engineer, and I said, hey, can you go over and take a look at the gain staging and just gently go over and fix that? And he went over, and in 20 minutes that they literally came back and said, this has never sounded so good. And it was just because their gain staging was all over the place. Gain staging is magical when you get it right. So, gain staging and ringing out the room are two huge things that can make a massive difference in your audio setup.
And John Wallace comes in with so many feedback situations are an underpowered PA and compensating by overgaining. And Mickey has chimed in as well that Alex read. It's one of those things where if you're, and I think we all do this to some degree, where we're looking for the answer, and sometimes we think we can just buy our way out of it. But if we're missing the good, solid fundamentals, then we're trying to process a signal that's not ready, wasn't good in the first place. Whereas if we just take a breath and work on the basics, we can get there. Alexander?
Yeah, just a couple other things too, and this is I could talk about this for a long time, but it's kind of out of scope for this show and this one question. But a couple of things too. I would recommend, if you're trying to learn how to EQ and do processing, you may want to actually check out Michael Curtis's YouTube channel. He's really, really fantastic. He was on an office hours show, I think a couple of years ago, not too long ago, but he's got so many great playlists on his channel that covers how to do live sound for this type of thing. So I would recommend learning that. And I will say there's two things. Before you learn about processing, there's two things I remember when I first started learning that really changed everything. Once I actually figured out gain staging, there's two other things that make a massive difference. Learn how to use your high pass filters and your low pass filters. Those two things on I don't care what mic it is, low pass filter, high pass filter, learn what those do, learn where to put the cutoff for the frequency. That makes a massive difference in terms of just getting the intelligibility there, keeping the mic under control in that room as well, because every room is different, and especially if this room is very, very lively, you really got to control that high end and the low end. So, and he's got lots of videos that talk about that.
Yeah, a couple times on Wednesdays, we've heard Mickey recommend the Yamaha Sound Reinforcement Handbook, and you go online and it's $25, and it was published in 1998. But here's the news: the physics of acoustics has not changed a whole lot. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, everyone has said is important, and as Mickey said, it can make your sound be less intelligible and more on the poo side, Winnie. But the way that these feedback killers work is they're like a 40 band bandwidth, a 40 band reject filter that is dynamically controlled if you have it in automatic mode, and so it's suppressing certain frequencies where it's hearing feedback or unusual activity in that particular band. And so if you put it in automatic mode, it's dynamic, it's changing all the time. So you get a woman speaker up there and it'll change. And it may suppress some of the high frequencies, and so the women's speaker may become less intelligible because it's, if you have a room that's resonant frequency is fairly high, or you have speakers behind where the microphones are, or if somebody grabs the microphone around the head of the microphone, it changes its directionality, and that can cause feedback. So you have to be able to have it accommodate those kind of situations which arise. And if you go into manual mode or fixed mode, you can still get feedback because those strange situation where somebody grabs the microphone, walks out in front of the speakers, or moves far away from it and starts to gain the microphone up to get a good level out of it, then it's going to create feedback. So it has to be either dynamically controlled or have a mixer in there to ride the gain to prevent the majority of the feedback, and you just let it catch those runaway situations where it will catch it faster than a mixer will figure out which mic is feeding back and take it down.
Your questions and votes drive our show, so remember to use Makana. You can chat there, also ask questions, and also vote on the questions. We've got a bunch of questions today, so the ones that get the most votes is what we get to first. If you don't have access, go ahead and sign up at officehours.global/join. That's officehours.global/join. And then you can put in your email, and you sign up, you'll get links on how to get into Makana, Discord, all the good stuff. Next question.
This is a QR code question coming from Max Schiffman in San Diego. Using the Zoom plugin on vMix and the audio of the guest is drifting in and out of sync. Is this a known issue, and are there any workarounds?
Alex?
This is almost always a CPU issue. So when you see the audio and video pulling it in and out of sync, it's either their computer or your vMix computer, and it's most likely your computer on vMix that is underpowered. So look at your CPU usage and see where if you're over 60%, it's too high. so it's too high. It means your spike, because what happens is if you see it running over 60, when you're not looking at it, it might be hitting 80 or whatever. And what will happen is it starts to become more efficient. It starts to drop that out. So, but it typically, these things, it could be a connection as well. So you should have 10 megs a second per person for vMix. And that person has to have 10 megs. It should be a wired connection, not Wi-Fi. And they should have a computer powerful enough to be part of that process. But I'm going to guess that your vMix station is running when you're watching it. I'm going to guess that it's running over 60%, and that's when you're going to start to see anomalies. Oh,
Next.
Yep. Go ahead.
Next question.
Another QR code question from Steve Dempsey in Dubai, United Emirates. Our client is looking to hold a meeting in a shell-type exhibition room with open ceiling. The meeting should be private as there is competition surrounding. Aside from drape, what other options can we propose to keep noise in, ideally aesthetic?
Nigel?
I guess it depends on how big the meeting that you're describing is and how big the space. So if you're in a large convention center and you've got one of these booths that has a meeting room and you can put a roof on it, which you can often do, then you can control some of that. If you really can't control the roof and it's a big room and it's amplified, then the only thing you're going to hope is that there's so much ambient noise in the convention center that it will drown some of it out. I was at InfoComm yesterday, and there were plenty of meetings going on all the time, and you can't really hear much because of the ambient noise. But I have to tell you, if it's really confidential, don't discuss it on the floor, unless it's 2 or 3 people that you can get very close to. Most big conventions have separate meeting rooms or separate meeting areas, and I would really try and avoid confidential material that you don't want your competitors to hear being spoken on a show floor.
Alex?
So I actually did something that is very similar to what you're asking for in a place very close to where you are. Budget was not, a big concern for the project. And so what they ended up doing, I didn't design this, but what they ended up doing was building a couple tents inside of the tents. So what they did is they had a tent out. Imagine a tent hanging from the convention floor, and it had it down here. And then they hung it, another one that was inside that left like a foot between the two. And then another one that was like 3 inches between the two. And so it went out like this, and it looked amazing. Like it just looked, it fit into the environment well, of what, in fact, it probably looked more like the culture than almost everything else in that space, because it was not that kind of space. So anyway, but it sat there, and it just felt like this, for lack of a better word, Bedouin tent or something. Like it just felt like this tent, and it looked really gorgeous. I have no idea how much it cost. I'm sure it was so much, because it had a little, it had a lot of stuff on the outside. And so, but when you walked in, it was super quiet, and it was really, really thick. All the cloth and everything else was this super thick cloth. And so it just killed everything because it had air gaps. The drapes sat against the floor, so they wasn't like they were hanging, so there was no air at the bottom. So they had thought through that process. And again, I don't know what it took to put it up. I don't know how much but it was one of the more remarkable things I've seen at an event space, when you walk in and you just feel like you're in a completely, and then inside it was very lush. I know you'd think you'd be surprised in that area that things would be lush, but it was spared no expense kind of lush. And it was like, it felt like you were in the middle of a conference, an expo area, and you just disappeared like into another world. And so that's the best part of designing things in that part of the country, that part of the world, because you say, well, that's going to cost a lot of money. And they're like, how much? And they pull out a wallet like, okay, let's see how this goes. I don't know if that's the position you're in, but that's the position that the clients that I was in were in, and there was no number that was going to bother them. And so so people just started making stuff up that was great. So, and all I was doing is helping with cameras. So,
Courtney?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the amount of isolation that you need. If you need complete secrecy, in other words, let's say you've got a competition going on where there are contestants that are going to come in and they don't need to hear, they cannot hear what the previous contestants were answering on questions, let's say. It's a lot easier than trying to isolate the entire room is to isolate the contestants off stage. Give them headphones to wear, playing something that's music or something that will keep them from overhearing what's going on inside the room. If that's your goal, that's a much easier solution, is to isolate the people that are outside to keep them from hearing what's on the inside. There's also sound masking, which can eliminate, which are basically speakers that generate white noise that can eliminate intelligibility on the outside of the venue. If that's your goal, is to maintain secrecy. If it's just to keep you from annoying people in a convention, let's say, that are outside your booth, then you're going to have to try and build in the booth, as Alex said, or double tint it, or find some means of containing the sound and operate at much lower signal levels than you normally would in a larger area. So it depends on your situation and who you're trying to keep from hearing, and whether you're trying to keep people from actually understanding what's being spoken inside, or if you're just trying to keep it from being annoying to people outside.
You know, NAB had this thing where they had the meeting rooms that were all closed off, and it was almost like they brought in little modular trailers and built them inside, and there was soft walls on the outside and soft walls on the inside, and, you know, a lot of mass so that sound couldn't get through. But then they had these, and I didn't understand this, but then they had these cabanas that were like off to the side, and it was as if you were at like poolside. It was like the whole back wall was just these weird cabanas. And people were in there talking business, and I'm like, if I'm at a trade show or a convention, I'm thinking that there are eyes and ears everywhere, and that's going to immediately limit my ability to have comfort. However, I got to thinking, and Alex, you made me think of this with your idea too. The only way to take that to one more level up is just to put some broad spectrum noise like right on that outside layer. So like there's a little cone of like waves, or, you know, it's for the ambiance as you're walking into this little separate space. But in reality, you're just creating a ton of noise so that if anybody really were trying to listen, they're going to have a tough time. Nigel?
Yeah, I was going to say that unless you have the $250,000 that Alex wants you to spend, I would always
I'll be honest with you. I think it might have cost more than that. I don't know what the number was, but seeing it, I think 250,000 was like that was the design fee.
So in these big, and again, a lot of it will depend on the size of the convention centers. So the UAE has all different size convention meetings, from ballrooms up to fairly major conference centers. You've not lived, however, until at NAB or CES. You've spent 2 days in a meeting room somewhere at the back of the convention, of one of the convention halls, with no natural light and no air conditioning, having meetings 10 hours a day. That's the way to experience these events in their full nature. But again, I'm sorry to be silly about this. Unless you can do what Alex is going to do, on the whole, keep confidential conversations out of the way.
And to be clear, like, I don't think that the idea was to make it confidential. The idea was to create a different space, you know, to create something that when you walked in, it didn't feel like you were in a convention area, you know, and then they had like, you know, nice tea and all the other things. And so it was like an oasis inside of the space.
Next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas, discussed the Electric Sheep suite of AI-powered post-production tools like camera angle tweaks, scene extensions, and the ability to generate new backgrounds behind actors.
Alex is dreaming of Electric Sheep. He's not a robot, though.
Exactly. So this is Electric Sheep. It's so hard to keep up. I haven't played with this one specifically. It is so hard to keep up with the number of AI tools right now around filmmaking. So what's happening is that whether it's Kling just did another release, and suddenly everybody has to release. Midjourney is now doing video. Disney is suing Midjourney because not because of the video. Well, because of the video, but because I think that the lawsuit came after Disney realized that the best Star Wars content other than Andor since Rogue One has been AI stormtroopers, and that's got to drive them crazy. And so they're like, someone's got to get sued for this. You know,
sue them all.
They're outdoing us. They're outdoing us with our own content. So anyway, and so so I think that, but I think that you're going to see this incredible. Now you can kind of I have to admit, until the last week, I was kind of like, you know, I don't know when AI is really going to turn the corner on some of this filmmaking stuff, and it accelerated. It literally jumped in my eyes 2 or 3 years faster than I thought it would. And so I don't even, you know, like it's not that you can still produce a 2-hour film or a 30-minute whatever, but the 1 minute, you know, stuff is outrageously funny. Like it's mostly comedy is what it does well. You know, so, but it's going to be really complicated. And so I think that I think it's really interesting. I do think my primary use for AI is pre-visualization. So I think something like Electric Sheep could make sense for me, but I haven't had time to play with it yet.
You can ask questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. It's quick and easy. There's nothing to sign up for, nothing to log into. Just go to askofficehours.global, put in your name, put in your question, and we'll work it in over the next few shows. Next question.
At Ecoconverter in Viera, Florida, USA, 15-inch Elgato Prompter soon to be released per InfoComm booth staff. Too big for Zoom monitor or better?
Nigel?
I was at that booth yesterday playing, by the way, with the new Stream Deck. See if I could feel the difference on the buttons. Another story. I'm staring into the original prompter. I think it's a 9-inch screen. And I have to tell you, it fits perfectly between two monitors. My concern is for a home setup, or what I use it for, which is, as another screen of my Mac, the 15-inch would move my other two monitors too far apart and take up too much space, and then I'd want to move it and stuff. Now, the downside of this prompter is there is no HDMI input, so you're literally using this as another screen on your Mac. Now, you can solve that problem 10 other ways using QuickTime and stuff. But if what you want is another screen that you can look at Zoom participants in and use to read scripts, the Prompter is a great, very easy device. By the way, it's a device I recommend to other people who aren't very technical because it's very easy to set up. I think the 15 would be, for a home setup, for a small studio, actually quite big, but maybe in a more production-based world, a better size.
Alex?
If Elgato figures out how to do a 15-inch all-in-one teleprompter with an HDMI input, take my money. Like for $500 or less, I got a check here. I'm ready to write it. The problem that I've had with the Elgato Prompter is what Nigel touched on, which was computer-only input. I have a much more complex system. I can't do that. I need to have everything on HDMI or SDI or something. I can't have it just be a direct connection to one computer. So, but I definitely would love to see something that was the same form factor as the smaller Elgato, but with an HDMI input. I have a feeling that because they're going to 15 inches, they may think about that. It wouldn't be that hard for them to add an HDMI selection. And again, if they, how much is the 9-inch one?
$300.
$300.
Yeah, so if they wanted to go to $500 or $600 or $700, even $700, I'd be really interested in it. Right now, for anything reasonable, we're talking $800 and above, and those are complicated. They're very flexible, but they're very complicated to put together. I've got a couple of the iCans, and the Prompter People ones are great. They're the best ones out there. They're just really expensive. They've gone for a higher market, and so they're $2,000 or $1,500 to $2,000 to start with, which is just more than and they're really bulky. And so what I love about the Elgato one is that it's nice and compact. I don't care about the size. The screen size could get bigger, but I like the fact that they just built it all into this is what it's going to do. But it's got to, if they could lower the price, it would be a big deal.
Courtney.
And do we know is it a 4:3, Nigel, or is it at a 16:9 aspect ratio?
The current one is 16:9, so I assume it's going to be the same, just with a bigger panel, which will make it about 50% bigger, which is quite big.
And since you're requiring the computer to do image reverse for you, it's probably not built into the monitor itself. I'm not sure because I don't own one. But,
I think it is. It's
it
built
acts as a separate screen, so I would think they're doing that in the operating system rather than.
No, yes, you are correct. It's in that prompter software that they have.
Right. So because of that, I think a 15-inch is for people who are going to be 4 or 5 feet away from their teleprompter and camera. If you're using it in a Zoom situation where you're like we are, 2 feet, maybe 3 feet away from the camera, it's probably not going to, it's going to get further and further away from its intended purpose, which is to keep your gaze into the camera, because you're going to be looking off to the side. And even with a 15-inch, here, for example, I'm looking within 4 inches of the lens of my camera right now, which is where you would be able to look on a 15-inch monitor with the same camera mounted behind it. Now I'm looking to the right by about 4 inches. And it's a difference in gaze that you will definitely notice. So if you're using it for teleprompting, in other words, reading text, it's probably more for the creators that are doing that kind of stuff, that are standing behind a table or something and the prompter is 5 or 6 feet away from them. For that, it's perfect operation for that. And they might be able to operate the prompter themselves from a foot pedal or from a hand control or voice-activated software that will follow them along if they're reading text off of it. But for Zoom, where you want to, use that 15-inch monitor as your main monitor to have all your stuff arranged, your Zoom meeting, and maybe a research screen over here, like we do over here, and another screen over here for comms, and we have all kinds of stuff, and you could have a smaller screen that has the gallery on it in the middle in front of the camera. That could work, but at times you're going to be looking off camera anyway because it's 15 inches.
So I am going to disagree a little bit about the gaze thing, and here's why. I installed and now you got to, first of all, I spent the money on the camera and the lens here, so I did not have a big prompter budget. So I went with a newer 15-inch reflective glass and one of those portable monitors that was 15 inches to put under it. Works really great. The brightness is awesome. When I'm having a Zoom meeting with one person, and they're full screen, it is so great to be able to see all the little micro expressions in their face and how they react to things and read the body language, and where their eyes end up is right where the lens is. So when I'm with one person, I'm looking right at the lens. However, when I'm in a meeting with many people, I actually like that as I look around the gallery, like there's an intention there that they see that I'm changing kind of who I'm addressing and who I'm talking to. At the office, I put in the current Elgato, the 9-inch or what have you. And don't get me wrong, like Alex said, I like the build quality. I like that it's all in one. The little matte box that has the thing that screws onto the front of the lens to make it, easier is nice. But I find that it's almost too small to be able to get the benefit of being able to have the technology get out of the way. Like, I'm always conscious that I'm in a video call. When I'm in this system and someone's full screen, after 20 minutes or so, I forget that it's a video call because it feels so natural. When it's on that little screen, that kind of goes away. And then when you have 9 people in a tiny little meeting, yeah, it just gets tough. So I'm gonna say yes, 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 and yes. If you can do that with HDMI in, like, let's party, because that's going to be an awesome system. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. How do you document your drive backup routines? Do you let the software track the events, or do you have a chart or list?
Alex?
The way I back up a lot of stuff, I don't really back up a lot of my core drive. What I'm doing is constantly putting events into drive systems by themselves. So a lot of times I need to have them all in one place so that I can grab onto them. So it's usually when I'm done with something, we're going to wrap it up and put it on a drive and then keep it separate as that drive. And typically the way we do it is 2 spinning drives that we put them on. And it's just the cheapest, easiest way to do this. It's also I don't need a big system. I don't need some kind of tape system. I don't need anything else. We put them on 2 spinning drives. Anybody with a toaster can pull them back out again. Those toasters you drop them into can pull them back up. Can grab the data. We usually keep those in 2 separate places. Sometimes we go through so much data. When people say, "Oh, you should do one in the cloud," the 3-2-1, that makes sense. But when you're generating terabytes, it doesn't make sense. So we oftentimes don't do that. One thing I will say is we do keep a lot of stuff in frame in archive. And one of the things I was kind of surprised by is how quickly Frame used to be 3 or 4 hours to de-archive. And now, like, I just did one recently. I had to pull some footage and I de-arced it, and it de-arched instantly. And I was like, why would you keep it in real time if it's going to de-arc? So just note that Frame is gotten, I don't know if that's just me or whatever, but it's de-arcing now in minutes, if not seconds. And so instead of 3 or 4 hours coming out of deep archive, which saves you a lot of money, it's much cheaper to keep your footage in archive than in real time.
Courtney.
Yeah, I haven't used a full drive backup system in probably 15 years, 20 years. Back when you could, back up your whole drive or then do an incremental backup, every week, let's say. Then it was important to be able to restore your, if you had a hard drive crash, it could restore your whole operating system and all of your files. And the incremental would keep your daily driver files that have been updated. Nowadays, I just subscribe to Carbonite that backs up in the background I just designate certain folders where all of my documents folder, let's say the accounting folders, the stuff that changes on a daily basis. So they'll be automatically backed up to the cloud. And then I have a local NAS that I've written scripts for that are just icons on the desktop. And whenever I make a bunch of changes, let's say do a bunch of accounting, pay a bunch of bills, et cetera, I just click that button on the desktop and it makes a copy and overwrites the previous backup so it doesn't keep rolling backups on my NAS. So that way, I tell it when to back it up. The problem with an automated backup is that if you're in the middle of something and something crashes, let's say, and crashes your main accounting file, let's say, and then your automatic backup then takes that crashed file and overwrites your file on the server somewhere. Now you've got two crashed files. So I prevent it from doing that because I make sure that the file that I'm working with is solid and not not munged in any way before I click that backup button to the backup NAS.
Nigel?
Maybe an obvious comment, but the trick is not backing up. The trick is recovering. It's easy to back up. It's harder to recover. Make sure your scripts and whatever processes you follow not only backs up, but practices the recovery, because that's the bit where it typically goes wrong.
There was one time where I had a Mac that went to the Genius Bar, and it had a logic board issue. No, it had a keyboard issue, and they were like, "Yeah, but we have an extra logic board, so we're just going to say that we messed up the keyboard," and they switched it out for me, which was awesome. But with the integrated memory, all my stuff was gone, and they said, "Are you backed up?" When I checked the phone, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm backed up, no worries." Then I got the computer back and I opened it up. It said, "Hello, welcome to your new Mac," and I said, "Oh." And then I tested it and it worked, but I definitely the next week I felt really good about myself. It's like, yeah, I got back. I round tripped this sucker. I got to say, carbon copy cloners are great if you're doing drive duplication and you want to have verification and logs of everything that's changing. It does a good job of logging every single time. And I find that I don't, like Courtney was saying, I don't do full drive backups anymore so much as I do my content, because it's remarkably fast, especially with now that I've got fiber at home. If I want to reinstall all my applications and all the plugins and everything that I was downloading anyway, that happens so fast that I don't feel the need like I need to back up absolutely everything like maybe you did 15 or 20 years ago. We've got some evening shows for you to watch live or later. So we've got extra hours on Monday nights, the rundowns on Thursdays. Every now and again, we'll throw a Tuesday in there so you can check that out on our YouTube channel. Watch live or later. Next question.
This one's coming from the QR code. Jeremias Mananen in Finland is asking, can Atem SDI Extreme ISO accept 4K input and downscale it to 1080p? I heard Blackmagic Design mention that you can use it with Atem Television Studio 4K 8 to record ISO, and wonder if that would work with my 4K Constellation 2ME for ISO running 4K 2997.
Alex?
No, I don't believe any of the inputs on an Extreme will, or any of the minis will see anything more than 1080p. That's what they're built for. It would take a lot more. It would make them more expensive if they were able to handle 4K. So I don't believe that you can put any kind of 4K signal into that. As an aside, by the way, Newer has a 17-inch teleprompter that now is
so
25% off, $245 with shipping and taxes. For a 17-inch teleprompter.
No, it's just the glass.
Does that include the monitor?
No, it doesn't include the monitor, but you can get you can get a monitor for $80. But we're definitely talking about a 17-inch teleprompter for $350 all in. Oh man. You're expensive.
Those
I didn't even know Newer made them.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, those little no-name monitors that are just that are bus powered, that you would like take for traveling. If you get the one that's not the 1080 cheapest one, but the 4K one, it's the nits. It has a lot more nits. It's a lot brighter. You don't have to drive at 4K, but it becomes a really slick little setup where that screen is small enough you can almost fit it in the prompter case. Right. Comes with a nice hard case, and I'm a big fan of the 15. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Next question.
This one comes from Fonsactor G, and he's asking, hi panelists, during our recent live coverage of our soccer tournament, how do I set volume of the commentary? One of them was very loud, while the other one wasn't. I use a Behringer Xenyx 1204 USB mixer. Does Atem have built-in audio limiter?
Alexander?
The Atem does have a built-in mixer with processing. However, before we talk about that, we should really talk about managing levels on your analog mixer. So ideally you want to do a sound check, but the thing is with sports commentary, usually sports commentators are very, very dynamic, but it's your job as the engineer to react when there are problems and keep your fingers on those faders. So if one of them is too loud, you can bring them down. Or Mickey even mentioned this in the chat too. So it's really about balancing the mix properly live as it's happening. You want to make sure that you give yourself enough headroom. Usually analog mixers are a lot more forgiving. Usually try to keep your levels hovering around 0 dB. Most of those analog mixers, even the Behringer, you still have quite a bit of headroom above 0. But just try to give yourself enough headroom. Also, if you're going to be recording the audio into an ATEM, which is not fantastic, when you're dealing with any digital mixer, and especially of a lower quality one like that, make sure you give yourself a lot of headroom. So what I would try to do is, if you're running balanced outputs from the Behringer, remember that the inputs on the ATEM are going to, by default out of the factory, they're going to be set to a mic level signal. So you want to first go into your ATEM software control panel, set those 3.5 millimeter jacks to line level. And then I generally would recommend a +4 dBu to -10 dBV converter box. Radial makes the J-ISO, which is a high quality converter box that'll convert it down to that level, and give yourself lots of headroom. I would probably try to keep your levels averaging around -20 dBFS. So if you look at the digital meter readout on the ATEM inputs, try to keep it at that -20 mark, which gives you lots of headroom, because if that announcer suddenly gets really loud, you don't want clipping, and it sounds awful on the ATEM, and it's really hard to fix that in post. So just be careful of that.
Alex?
Yeah, and folks, like, we realize that you're, obviously, if you can afford it, and I know that oftentimes productions are, constrained by what can be actually afforded. But, having something there, having AGCs, some auto gain might be something that can help. It's not the perfect thing. The perfect thing is an A1 with a digital mixer. So in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of, I haven't used analog mixers for, I've actually used to own 8 of those, the mixer that you're talking about. So it's not that I haven't owned them. But once you get used to digital mixers, you can add things like compression and all kinds of other things into it. The other thing to think about is, if you can't afford an A1, you just need to listen to them for the first 5 minutes. You got to have somebody over there for the first, go over there, do a wide shot, or have somebody else do something, or have it right there. One of the advantages of digital mixers, if you can afford one somewhere in the future, is that you can have an iPad wherever you are that is tied into the network, and you can just kind of move things around as you listen to it without having to sit over top of the mixer as well. That's one of the big things. The biggest reason we moved to all digital, we used to use for all of our little rooms, we actually used this Behringer that you have, the 1204s. And we thought it would keep it simple and everything else. What we found is that we couldn't control it. So what we ended up doing is we'd have 8 rooms, and we swapped it out, in our case, with Midas 32 M32s. But all those Midas M32s were controlled. We had one person, Brian Maddox, who would have access to all of them. And when we had the folks that we ordered, audio engineers have this tendency to fiddle, like they feel like they have to do something, and so you'd see them move their sliders up, and then Brian would move them back down again, or they'd move them down and he'd move them back up again remotely. So those motorized faders become pretty useful. So I would highly recommend it if you can afford it to do that. Even a X32 rack or one of the new wings, I think that you'd probably get more use out of an XR18. Would probably be something that you could use for what you're doing here, and it would probably sound better.
And one other thing, if you're trying to get used to them talking before the show and trying to get those levels set, one thing that we used to do for a little bit, I did play-by-play commentary for football, and they would play a prior week's game for a few minutes as part of the pre-show checks, and I would, because we didn't know really what we were doing, we were just goofing around, but they would set my levels based on me calling, the prior game with the other person, and once we had that banter and that rhythm back and forth, it helped audio get their level set because we were also on a skeleton crew. Alex?
Yeah, and Craig makes a good point. If you're using an iPad for your digital mixer, make sure if you decide to go down that path, is make sure you have a network connector and adapter. So connect it to the network via wired connection, not Wi-Fi.
Next question.
This one's from CJ Covell in Cincinnati, Ohio, USA. I think I've heard of him. What gives with computer monitors not supporting 30 hertz? How does system change in? I'm finding the monitor search frustrating.
Just to hop in at the head end of this. So I realized my system was at 60p for months apparently, and I didn't notice. So I was like, okay, I got to get it back into 30. I bought my Dell monitor with the ICC13 and HDMI in, the cheapo one that I thought it was the one Alex recommended, but apparently not, because that one, the other Dell monitor that I had, and now a third monitor say, please give us 60 hertz. And then I'm trying to find the other, a cheap monitor to replace it online. And it's like pulling teeth. They just don't tell you. But I'm missing something. Alexander?
Yeah, so we were talking about this before the show. If you haven't seen this already, CJ, you may want to have a look at this video put out a year ago by Doug Johnson Productions, titled 3 Favorite Video Monitors for Live Production. So he talks about, there's a Asus ProArt series, there's the LG, I forget the model of that series, the LG and the Asus, and there's one other. There may be an Adele in this video, but they support a lot of different frame rates. He even used a decimator here to show the type of frame rates that it was coming in at. So those monitors will support everything from 23 all the way up to 60 and all the fractional frame rates. But you're right, this is a common issue with computer monitors because computer monitors generally aren't designed to be hooked up to production switchers. They're designed to hook up to a PC, and PCs generally use 60 hertz or higher. So that's the issue that you're running into. So there may be some options. I know Alex Lindsay's got some Dell monitors here, so maybe he's got some insight onto the versions that are inexpensive that support that. But it sounds like you might need to change your monitors, which is rather unfortunate.
Alex?
And what size are you using?
I just had a 24, and I used to have a 27 or a 32 LG that was like a proper like a nicer computer monitor, and it just did it. And so I didn't think about it back when I was at the old place on 30 hertz. But I guess when I dropped it in the move and cracked it, so I was like, I'm going to replace it with one of these little monitors. And then also during that time, I think I made the jump to 60.
Yeah, so I have a Dell, I have 6 Dell P24 15Qs. And I think when I bought them, they were $90 each. Like they were on some sale on Amazon. They're not very expensive Dells. And that's kind of what I use as my utility monitors. So I don't feel bad about them. I can tell you, I don't know what your computer will do, but I can tell you that when I pop it open, I get 60, 50, 30, 25, and 24 on that specific model. And
it's coming out of the ATEM, so that's why I got to have it's the HDMI out of the ATEM.
Mine's this Dell right here is coming out of the ATEM.
Nice.
so it's getting that right now. So I don't. It should be able to support that frame rate. At least the ones that I'm doing. I don't know what I may be setting my ATEM to 60. I don't know. I'll have to go look. I haven't looked at it for a long time. If it reset or something like that. But I think that. So it should support it. What happens oftentimes also though is that, and again, I don't think that should be a problem. Yeah, my ATEM is set to 2997. So I'm at my ATEM's at 2997. It's feeding now. Technically, it's feeding into a Blackbird 8x8 and then going to it, but it should be the same. It's the signal. That signal is going to this monitor over here. And so I'm having that, but that's the Dell P24 15Q. Not very expensive. It fulfills the 3 basic things that I have about monitors. One is that it has to have the problem with there was a suggestion, Eduardo Augustine said, Asus and LG are the way to go. And the reason I don't use those is many of those monitors have external power supplies. So they require an external lug, and I will not buy them that way because I lose them. I lose the power supply and then I'm done, and so it has to be a C13 cable. So it's the standard 3-prong. I will not buy a monitor without that anymore because I keep losing the wall warts and then I can't do it. Even if I label them, they get separated from it. So, and Alexander Knight said the Asus ProArt comes with CalMan calibrated. Yeah, so the larger ones do, but the less expensive ones, they've externalized that. The other thing it has to have is a VESA mount on the back, so 4-pin, either 75 or 100 millimeter. And then the third thing that it has to have is HDMI, which I bought some that were like DisplayPort only. So that's why. So those are the three things that my minimum requirement, like I won't look at the monitor any longer if it doesn't have those three things for any of my standard ones.
And thank you, Roscoe, about the note on the LGs. I have 4 of those in the 32-inch version around this multi-view monitor. They are great monitors. Courtney?
Yeah, because now on all computer monitors, they're trying to serve the gamer market. And of course, the gamer market wants the super high refresh rates. They're not interested in 30 refresh. That's, verboten. So they concentrate all their speed. They concentrate all their effort on creating higher speed monitors with a higher refresh rate on computer monitors, whereas broadcast monitors try and support the standards, including 60i or 2997, fractional frame rates, those kind of things. You can find out, usually, there's software out there. I don't know on the Mac what's available out there, but you can check the monitor. There's software that can read the EDID from the HDMI and put on that monitor, and it will give you a list of all the frequencies that EDID table presents to the computer. And if your frequency that you want to use isn't in that EDID table, you probably won't be able to use it. So that way you can check a monitor pretty quickly or get the specs from the manufacturer, what frequencies and resolutions it supports in that EDID table.
Appreciate it, everybody. If you're finding office hours valuable, there are a few ways you can help. You can, of course, like and subscribe to our channel. You can also volunteer during the show, around the show. More information on that at officehours.global/volunteer. Finally, there's officehours.global/donate. You can contribute financially to our show, helping it run. We appreciate it. We are listener supported and a nonprofit. So just head on over to officehours.global/donate, and we do appreciate the support. Next question.
Roland Booth in Jamaica is asking, some months ago, the issue of white balance when Courtney shared his browser screen was raised. It was being adjusted. Can he explain what he did to fix it?
Courtney?
Yeah, this is a feature that came about 4 or 5 years ago. It may be in the Mac too, as well as Windows. Windows came up with a feature when they discovered that watching the bluer screens of all your video screens, computer screens, laptop screens at night causes interruption in your circadian rhythms and makes it harder to go to sleep if you have that daylight light shining in your eyes. So they came up with something called night light in Windows. And so to change it, what it does is it adjusts the color balance more toward the red side of the spectrum. It eliminates blue light coming from your monitor after a certain point in time at night if you schedule it. It comes on at after sundown and will then gradually change the color balance of your screen. Here's the settings panel that is in Windows. Under Display Night Light, you can turn it on or off, and you can adjust the strength of it. If I can turn it off now, or I can turn it on. It's on now, and if I bring this up, you can see how red that image gets, and if I cut back to me, you'll see I look very red or purpley in comparison to what my color balance was before, and if I slide it to off, it changes the color balance back to normal. So that's, and also there's a setting on here that says schedule nightlight. That's, if you turn that on, it will usually schedule it to come on at a certain time of day after sundown or after 8 o'clock at night, let's say. So you want to make sure that that's turned off if you want your color balance to remain consistent and you don't want it turning red. I thought it would only affect one monitor, the monitor that you adjusted on, but it does it for all monitors in Windows. When Nightlight comes on, all screens plugged into that computer will then shift more to the red.
That answer brought to you by the legendary Courtney Gooden, who today is celebrating another trip around the sun. Happy birthday, good sir. I believe we can assume the position.
All right. Are you ready? All right, here we go.
My birthday lands on Friday the 13th.
All right, there we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
Happy birthday, dear Courtney. Happy birthday to you.
We appreciate you every single day, sir. Thank you
you.
for coming in and always sharing your life experience. Let's sneak in one more question.
All right, this last one is from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida, USA. What is the benefit of Zoom Room's custom AV controller? Audio must be separate with Dante. Why would someone choose this over ZoomISO? By the way, Zoom InfoComm display of this was spoofed with ZoomISO.
Alex.
I have it from a pretty good source that the InfoComm display was not spoofed from ISO and was actually Pro AV. so I pretty good source about that. So the thing to look at is that number one is ZoomISO is Mac only, so it's Mac only, and you can use PCs and lots of other things. What the Zoom custom AV controller is really built for is enterprise and broadcast. So higher density outputs, being able to build all-in-one stuff. So there's a lot of things that are happening. Zoom is, as of InfoComm, certifying hardware, including Blackmagic. I think they rolled this out with Blackmagic. So they're really certifying hardware cards for the use with Zoom. Zoom also announced new technology to integrate hardware peripherals, and you saw that with the Stream Decks there, so that you have a more direct connection. Neural Net is switching over from WebRTC to Zoom as a transport layer for their system, which allows you to pick things. But really, if you're doing it in the cloud, if you're working in enterprise, if you want more control over the Zoom meeting and the Zoom rooms, all of those things you're going to have more access to. If you want to build external controllers, all of that stuff is really built for this kind of heavy iron version of this. If you're going to use this all the time in an enterprise or broadcast environment, that's probably where you're going to do it. It continues to kind of push forward that Zoom is really the gold standard for integrating this into any kind of event, doing anything professional. Like if you want to have little meetings, all the other ones you can kind of pull that off, kind of. So I'm in a lot of meetings in Google Meet and Teams and WebEx and everything else. And as soon as you decide I want to be serious about something when it comes to and create an event out of what I'm doing, all these tools that Zoom's building it just really sets it apart from everything else that's out there right now.
That's going to wrap up our Friday. Thank you, producers, for asking such wonderful questions and keeping us informed as we learn through answering questions and hearing about all of the great experience who comes from our panel, who we're also grateful for. Thank you for the panel for being here today. Privileged to get smarter with y'all, and happy birthday to a great panelist, Courtney Gooden. Also, finally, thank you to the back-end crew working around the show, during the show, keeping us organized, helping us run. Thank you very much. It's all traversal today. Had we gone around in person and asked these questions, 47,000 miles, that's 75,000 kilometers, 370 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in after hours.
Feels so much older today.
Try not to buy that teleprompter.
Oh yeah. So. It's the build quality is good on the newer. I'm very impressed. The one that I've been using for about a year now is really nice.
I ordered my aluminum, so I have to go pick it up on next week.
Oh, from your industrial metal supply?
Yeah, so much, so much aluminum. I realized I was like, oh right, I need a 22-foot truck to put 20-foot pipes in.
You're lucky you got it.
Yeah, there's that.
The tariffs kicked in on aluminum doubling.
Yeah, I guess I got it. It was
existing stock.
It was. I guess it was existing stock. It was only like $4 or $3 something a foot, which was great.
Yeah, everything that came into the country June 4th and forward got hit by the bump from 25 to 50. All steel and aluminum.
Oof.